Welcome to another episode of The Brand Called You, a podcast and podcast show that brings you leadership lessons, knowledge, experience, and wisdom from thousands of successful individuals from around the world. I'm your host, Ashutosh Garg, and today I'm delighted to welcome a very accomplished professional from Florida, USA, Aditya Guthey. Aditya, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Ashutosh. It's a pleasure to be on your show today.
Thank you. Aditya is a communications and leadership development coach. He was early a tech leader at companies like eBay and Verizon. His mission is to help tech professionals and leaders amplify their impact, positioning them as key drivers for business growth. So, Aditya, before we talk about the work that you're doing, tell me a little bit about your own journey in brief.
Absolutely. So I come from southern part of India, Andhra Pradesh. I took a typical route, which is become an engineer, came to the United States, did my master's, became an engineer. At some point of time, I felt stuck, right, in my career. Like, why am I not moving up? Why am I not growing as fast as I can? And that's when I worked with a coach, got a lot out of it. To a point where I was able to become an effective leader. I was able to be effective in how I present myself, that I decided, more than pursuing the leadership role in corporate, I want to help others become stronger leaders. And that's when I went through coach training program myself. And since that time, I've worked with over 150 tech professionals and tech leaders to help them more effective leaders.
How amazing.
So that's brought...
and I'm sure all of them appreciate the amazing inputs you're able to give them.
Yeah, thank you, Ashutosh.
So, tell me, in your view, how closely are communication skills and leadership effectiveness linked?
I think leadership is like 80% about communication skills, being able to, and many times, in tech industry, people are able to become stronger leaders and grow up in their career ladder, mainly because they're effective communicators. And through that effective communications comes the ability to build great relationships with your counterparts, direct reports, senior leaders. And that's how typically people grow in their leadership roles.
Very interesting. So let's now talk about your new avatar as a communications and leadership development coach. Based on the work that you've been doing with over 150 leaders, what are some common challenges leaders face when trying to communicate effectively, and how can they overcome them?
Yeah, great question. So, especially in tech, right? My niche is tech leadership.
Yeah,
and people get promoted primarily based on their technical skills, and because the only way to reward these such highly accomplished people in technical skills is to move them into leadership roles. And that's when they struggle, because until that time, they were not exposed to how do I manage people, which is a completely different skill set than being an individual contributor, being great at technical skills. So, and typical challenges senior leaders communicate with me when they bring me on as their coach or a trainer is either the tech leader is talking too much and pissing off other people, right? Or the tech leader doesn't communicate as much as he should be communicating, right? So that's where those are the two typical challenges that often come up.
Very interesting. And have you seen a change in the way you communicate or the way you coach because of what's been happening in the digitization of all communication and, of course, work from home?
Yeah, one of the things that, again, leaders ask me about is, hey, earlier we used to go in person to be able to, so that I was able to build those relationships. And that's how I really get my, relationship building piece built in. But with virtual communication, it's hard for me to communicate, right? But eventually, this is a new norm. We can change it. Of course, there are still hybrid models, but many times it's 100% remote. So how do you communicate effectively during this, when it's 100% virtual? So that's when communication skills even become more important piece. Earlier, when you're going in person, maybe you can play golf or play pool, and then eventually slowly talk about things that you're really passionate about. So there is more runway when you're more in person. But when you're in virtual communication, Ashutosh, I need to get to the heart of what you like quickly. So maybe doing more background research, like what does Ashutosh do? He wrote close to a dozen books, and he has been a CEO. So being able to do that research upfront, so that I can speak to the heart of what the other person wants and build relationships that way.
Thank you. Great response. Thank you. Next question, Aditya, is what role in your view does emotional intelligence play in leadership communication?
One of the foundational components of communication is not necessarily the words and phrases we use. It's more about the emotional intelligence. And the way it shows up is many times leaders are frustrated because the team members are not performing as much as they want to, or they're feeling defensive because their senior leader is a little bit aggressive with the targets and the goals. Emotional intelligence is about understanding the emotion and feelings behind that frustration. And many people don't go so deep into understanding what's the motive of the senior leaders. What is the reason why, even though I'm communicating to my team members, they're not responding? So there is something underlying within that. And by being emotionally intelligent about what is that underlying thing is how you can communicate to that pain point. Maybe you can say, hey, I see that there's a lot going on with your, maybe a lot going on with your family or something. So you're communicating directly to the pain point that your team member is facing. Or you can communicate to your senior leader saying that, hey, it seems like there are a lot of targets you're being given by your senior management team. How can I help you with that, right? So you're communicating directly to the pain point. Otherwise, most of the communication will be based on frustration. Senior leader is frustrated, so I'm going to show my frustration, and it becomes, people go down the rabbit hole, giving no results.
Amazing. Thank you. And my next question is, how do you help leaders develop an authentic voice while still maintaining their professionalism?
Yeah, another great question. So authentic voice, you want to be true to what you believe in.
Right.
At the same time, it's a balance between what can I say? Can I bring all my family stuff? Sometimes, unfortunately, that happens, right? And when we are not fully emotionally aware of how other people respond to our responses, we might bring more than we should be in corporate communication. So it's always a balance, and that's where I'll go back to the previous question, knowing how people perceive. By understanding, maybe with few people in my organization, I can speak about some things I won't speak to person B, right? So that's where being able to be emotionally intelligent about how far I can go with each person, and being that awareness helps you balance between being authentic while also adhering to company's values and culture.
Well said. And Aditya, how important is non-verbal communication in leadership? And what are some key areas leaders or maybe tech leaders should be aware of?
Yeah, so many times we focus on the words and phrases we use, right? For example, one of the classic phrases that many leaders use is, hey, my door is always open for questions. And many times, your body language suggests otherwise. Maybe you're not saying that with conviction. So when the person actually knocks on your door, you're like, I don't have time for this, dude. Come back later, right? Yeah. So again, that's where being true to your intentions, going back to your previous question, how can you be authentic and you don't say words that you don't mean, right? So that's where, the body, it shows up in body language, even though you might not say it in the words.
Very interesting. The other question is that, when you talk communications and leadership, I've often heard that storytelling is an important skill to develop. My question is, what are the key components of a compelling story or a narrative when you talk about leadership?
And this is such a key thing for leaders. Many times, when we, especially when we give certain assignments to our team members, or we are delivering a presentation to a group, bunch of stakeholders. If we are not aware about how important storytelling principles are, we might just start off with the end result. Hey, this is what it's like. You're talking about the end result, but the key, what makes a great story is starting with a pain point. It's like a typical Steven Spielberg or Rajmouli story. They piss people off in the beginning. They make them feel the pain in the beginning of the story. And then the more the pain you make them feel, whenever you show them the result, people are excited. People are motivated to do something about it. It's the same thing, when it comes to motivating your team members or doing presentations, start with the pain point. Explain why this should be addressed,
right.
And then jump into the solution, which creates more engagement among your audience or team members.
Fascinating. My next question is on culture, Aditya. And you live in probably one of the most culturally diverse countries in the world, in the US. How do you address the challenges of cross-cultural communication in global teams?
Yeah, I mean, this is again one of the things that commonly comes up, like when leaders are working with teams in India, teams in Brazil, teams in Europe. Like, how do you understand those cultural nuances, right? And the key to that is once again, it goes back to effective communication. Coming from a certain background, you might have assumptions about how people should behave. Right? People in US are more, they talk a lot, right? They talk about, which is more than they might share a lot more than what people from other backgrounds might share in a corporate environment. And you can't expect that from other countries, right? Sometimes other countries, they might not share as much, and there's nothing wrong with it. So, so that's where being curious is one of the key skills that we can all develop as leaders. Is just, hey, I'm curious, what's going on. We spoke about this, but you haven't said anything. And coming from that place of curiosity gives them the free space to trust and share what is actually going on.
Right. Thank you. Good response. My next question is that what happens if a leader does not communicate well? What can it do for the leader's brand or reputation?
First of all, you're not going anywhere in your career if you cannot communicate well. And that's unfortunately the challenge that happens with many tech leaders. And there is nothing wrong with it, right? We are just not trained in those skills. We didn't go to school to learn how to communicate. If you go to a B school, they have a ton of presentations they're constantly making versus being a tech leader. That's not the focus of what we have being taught. So, and the worst case scenario is your team is not engaged and your leadership team is not able to communicate or get a buy-in from you on their goals. And one of the topics I talk about often is how not to build a rocket when client asks for a bike. Right. So many times, that's what happens in business, because of which there's a huge gap between what the business actually needs and what the tech team is developing, which can cost hundreds and thousands of dollars in lost revenue.
Well said. The next question is more about listening. While it's very important to be able to communicate, a very significant part of communication is listening.
Yeah.
So I wanted to ask you, what techniques or strategies do you recommend for improving one's listening skills?
Yeah, another great question. Listening is one of the core components of communication. And many times, active listening people say that, like, you have to be a great listener. But what does that mean? Does that mean you have to listen until your ears bleed? So, but listening is more about trying to understand what the other person is communicating. Many times it might mean asking questions when it's not just passive listening, but you're actively participating by asking questions to understand what the person's intent is. Many times the person might not know what the intention of what some of the things that they're saying. Hey, we need to do this project. Hey, but hold on. Why is this project important to us? I'm curious, how does this help our business? And being able to ask those questions actively. And sometimes people might be just rambling because they have no idea what they want to talk about. In those cases, putting a step forward and saying, hey, hold on right there. I think, we're going in different directions. What is that you're communicating? If you can summarize that for me in two sentences. So these are all the pieces that are involved in active listening.
Fantastic. Thank you. The next few questions, Aditya, are about your role as a coach. And these are a little more personal. My next question is, how has your background as a tech leader, how has your background supported your coaching philosophy, your style, and your values?
Absolutely. So I come from India, and the only thing I thought I could become is becoming an engineer, and I didn't know what else exists beyond being an engineer. And maybe the next thing is doing an MBA and growing as a leader. That's the script that was given to me. Yeah. So pursuing something like coaching is a completely different concept and idea, and for me to be able to pivot into this speaking and coaching took a lot of self-awareness to understand where my beliefs come from, to understand what does it take to step into this new role, the kind of mental challenges I have to overcome, and also understanding the significance of my own background too. And also appreciating the importance of it. So, and by merging these two worlds, so this is all the work I have done within myself, which enables me to see others' struggles as well, so I can help them effectively in overcoming their challenges.
Well said. Well said. And, Aditya, all of us have had in our lives people who we look up to, people who have influenced our lives. And therefore, my question is, how have you been shaped by people in your life? And how are they influencing you as a coach today?
Yeah, I mean, the list goes on, but I would say, to give a simple answer, I would give the most credit to my wife, because she's the one who introduced me to this idea of coaching. She's the first person through which I decided I need to hire a coach. And since that time, it completely changed my life. And she's even when we have conflicts, we are great listeners. We understand, if someone, one of us is frustrated, what's behind the frustration. We use our intuition to understand what's behind that, and at the same time share what is behind our own frustration. Being able to share what is really bothering us, right, and being able to have that supportive partner has been one of the cornerstones for being able to take this pivot.
Fascinating. The other question now that I have for you is that, and you're a young leader yourself, and I've often said, I mean, I'm from the boomers generation, and I think that when the young leaders who are coming into positions of into influence in most organizations, they're bringing in an absolute breath of fresh air into most organizations, new perspectives, etc. But my question is, what, in your view, are some of the areas that these young leaders need to be coached in?
Yeah, again, the millennial generation and Gen Z generation are, the upcoming leaders. And then the thing I see with most of these young leaders is that, they're more independent. They can think on their feet a lot more than maybe my dad's generation or someone else, right? So, at the same time, it's great. It's great for the companies, like you said. It brings new energy, new ideas, and so on. But at the same, there is also some gold in what our parents have created, which is being grounded, following the rules, being able to do what needs to be done, even though it's painful, even though you don't like to do things, because ultimately you can't just do things that you feel are the right. And if you're pissed off, you're finding another company, and you're always changing jobs. You're not creating that trust with people. So it's a balance between how can I still be independent and stand on my feet and think, while being grounded to sometimes do things that I might not enjoy doing, but I still do it because for a greater good.
Right. Well said. So time for two more questions. My next question comes back again to culture. And now this time my question relates to culture to you as a coach. How does culture impact coaching?
Yeah, I mean, it's a big culture is a big piece of for coaching, right? Especially when senior leaders in the company realize the importance of emotional intelligence, everything that we've been speaking about, communication, leveling up their leaders instead of just getting more tasks done. And treat people like a cog in the wheel, unless that changes and the leaders realize the importance of bringing in new trainers, bringing in new coaches to be able to help their companies, and seeing the benefits that emotional intelligence, things like communication, can do to create engaged teams. There is no place for there's no development of their team members doesn't happen. So culture is a big piece of it, and there are many companies that focus on it. Few companies doesn't focus on it. So
well said. And Aditya, my last question to you, and this is for the many people who will listen to our conversation. Based on your own experience as a leader and now as a coach, what would you say are 3 lessons you would want a lot of our young viewers and listeners to take away from our conversation?
3 lessons would be, first, is understanding what your true motivation and passion is. I think many people feel stuck in their careers, or feel they're unproductive, or they're not maximizing strengths because they have no awareness of what they want, and which is the case for many people, right? At some point you will run into that situation, knowing that it's a common scenario, and that's an opportunity for you to understand, dig deeper into understanding what you want. And that might take some risks. You might have to do things that you might not be very comfortable with, stepping outside of your comfort zone to explore what that new thing is. If you have a passion for starting business, maybe actually starting that, because unless you do it, you won't be able to actually figure out whether you like it or not. At some point of time, you decided that I want to be an entrepreneur. I want to be an author. You don't know whether you can be successful at it until you have tried it or not, right? Absolutely. So have that courage. So I can go on, but I would say that would be the key thing that I would.
Okay. So on that note, Aditya, and your amazing lesson, which is, I think it's very critical to understand your own true motivation and passion. And then, as you said very rightly, once you understand your true motivation and passion, it's very important to be able to actually act upon it. Thank you so much, Aditya, for speaking to me about your own amazing journey. Thank you for speaking to me about so many different aspects of communication, how communication and leadership interact. Thank you for speaking to me about the importance of active listening. And thank you also for speaking to me about so many new perspectives of coaching that you have used in your interaction with so many other people. Thank you again, and good luck.
Such a pleasure to be interviewed by you, Ashutosh. Thank you again for having me.
Thank you. Thank you for listening to the brand called You Videocast and Podcast, a platform that brings you knowledge, experience, and wisdom of hundreds of successful individuals from around the world. Do visit our website www.tbcy.in to watch and listen to the stories of many more individuals. You can also follow us on YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. Just search for the brand called you.